What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to another Geeky Gecko Creations video. In this video, we're going to talk about a topic that a lot of people want to know is there money in leopard geckos, and how we strategized to make $100,000 off of leopard geckos in our first year. So let's get it going. All right, first of all, please don't be scared by this. I promise you we are going to slowly walk through this diagram and explain every single point as quickly and concisely as we can. So the first thing that I would like to mention is that the interest in leopard geckos and the leopard gecko market peaked in the early 2000s, plateaued in the mid 2000s, like 2010, 2015, and I would say that it's somewhere in between just staying at a plateau and or slowly diving down, and I'll explain why. Because when you talk about a market, you have to consider the investors in that market. So we're going to divide this video talking about investors, but also talking about pet trade and just pet quality animals. Or quality is the wrong word. I should say pet pricing animals, because you can sell $1,000 Black Knight for $100. A matter of fact, they're doing that in Korea and just making a ton of them. And that's a whole nother thing that we will probably touch on in this video as well, is how to defend yourself against market deflation, against the top dollar animals dropping every single year. And that's why I would say that the leopard gecko market is in a decline, is because I would honestly say every reptile market is in a decline, meaning that the top dollar animals in the market is lowering every single year. A great quick example of this is in the crested gecko market. They were having crested geckos selling for $30,000 3 years ago. Those same crested geckos are selling for $300 or $1,000 this year. And so you could see that that is a dramatic drop. And the top end animals are now maybe a few $1,000s max in the crested gecko market. And so to go from $30,000 max to $3,000 max is a huge drop. And I'm using general terms here, but that's the way that I am defining market decline, is that it means that there are no longer any $30,000 animals. And so let's move to the leopard gecko market, because this is a market that I am much more familiar in. A matter of fact, I might get some critique on my crested gecko example a second ago, but I kind of follow all the markets loosely and keep an eye on market value. And I do dabble in different species, but leopard geckos is really what I'm known for and really what I focus on and invest in. So if you take a few years ago, a high quality Black Knight pitch black male leopard gecko was probably the cream of the crop, the highest end selling animal that you could buy at around $3,000 to $3,500. Now you can arguably see that if I was to look at most expensive leopard geckos currently on Morph Market, you're looking at $1,500, $1,000, $1,000 for the same quality type animals. And you can see that those same pitch black Black Knights that were going for $3,000 3 years ago are now around $2,000. And so the top end market continues to drop and drop and drop. And Black Knights is actually an exceptional example, because they hold on to their value the longest in leopard geckos, because they are the most difficult leopard gecko to produce. Even if you take two pitch black Black Knights, you're not going to always get pitch black Black Knights. You're not always going to get males. You're not always going to get healthy animals, since it is an inbred project. And so because of all of those factors, Black Knight has actually maintained its value the most significant. If you look at ciphers or any other animals that were like $2,000 when they first came out that don't have breeding issues, you could get ciphers nowadays for $200 sometimes. So you could see that market value just over a couple years can drop so quickly. One of the reasons for that is because leopard geckos are really easy to breed, really easy to produce, and a lot of people breed them and produce them. So there's just a ton of them in the world and in the market. Also, another quick side note is you do have to take these sale prices with a grain of salt, because a lot of times people either wholesale these animals at a show for like half the cost, or they wind up working a group deal that somebody buys from them. So you do have to take these prices with a grain of salt. Not all the time they are selling for the prices that are listed. A lot of times they do, but you do have to keep in mind that a lot of times people are cutting deals on these prices, And when the animal gets sold, the price that it was actually sold for is not the same as the price that it was listed for, such as like $1,200, $1,900. So you do have to keep that in mind. Going back to our graph over here, I just want to show you a few things. So currently on Morph Market, which is where we were just looking at, this is the platform that a lot of breeders will buy and sell their animals off of, and there is currently 2,500 geckos on Morph Market, and that's a consistent number. About every single year, there's an average of about 2,500 to 3,500 geckos that are posted on Morph Market. Out of that, there is about 270 stores. Now, I will call these investors because a store is typically somebody who is looking to sell. A matter of fact, I'll do you one better, and it's specifically stores that have leopard geckos posted for sale. So when I looked at this the other day, it was 268. You can see somebody just entered the pool of leopard gecko selling and posted a leopard gecko, and so there's 269 stores. Now, this is a pyramid that just simply demonstrates the market of leopard geckos. You're going to have about 5% of breeders at the top that are making $100,000 a year plus in leopard gecko sales, and in the middle you're going to have about 10% of breeders that are making $50,000 a year plus, and then towards the bottom you're going to have beginners as well as just people who are keeping and collecting, and maybe these guys are making $5,000 a year plus, taking up 85% of the market. So if you divide that down into breeders, at any given year you have about 15 breeders making $100,000, 30 breeders making $50,000, and 230 investors or breeders making $5,000. Now, if we were to look at the amount of leopard geckos that actually get sold on Morph Market, is about 4,000 leopard geckos per year, and this number can vary a little bit, but I think that we get a good data skew when you look at how long Morph Market has been open for. It actually hasn't been open for that long. It opened in 2016 and now it's 2025, and so give or take, this number is going to be somewhat accurate, where over the last 9 years 36,000 leopard geckos have sold. And you could easily look at that by going to leopard geckos, going to availability, going to sold, and you can see there's 36,351 leopard geckos that have sold over the last 9 years. Now, if you really want to get nitpicky with it, you could go to like leopard geckos that sold based on the date. So you can see like this was last updated, this was last renewed. And if you were to keep backtracking this, you could find out exactly how many were sold since the beginning of 2024 unto the beginning of 2025. So you could tell in the last 12 months if the market is changing. But I think just generally taking a wide data capture of how many leopard geckos on average have sold over the last 9 years is a really good example. And the leopard gecko market has been pretty steady as far as the interest in leopard geckos. The crested gecko market is a little bit different because there was a big boom in COVID where tens of thousands of people jumped in all at once. And it's not like that for leopard geckos. Leopard geckos have been around one of the longest reptiles in the reptile hobby, so their market is very stable, meaning the amount of excitement and generation and buzz in the leopard gecko market has been stable / on a decline compared to the ball python market and the crested gecko market over the last couple years. Now, the ball python market and the crested gecko market are in a decline as well compared to like 2020, the interest and whatnot, and they are stabilizing as well because there was a huge investor boost, people thinking they would jump in, get rich quick, and then they wound up realizing that selling animals is not the best and easiest way to make money, and they jumped out, dumped their collections. And when people jump out and dump their collections, it does interfere with the market a little bit because you'll have $5,000 animals sold for $100 or something like that, just because people are getting out, right? So we will talk about this a little bit more at the end of this video as far as what are the benefits and the cons of being in each one of these tiers, a top tier, a middle tier, and a beginner or bottom tier. What are the pros and the cons of shopping and or selling in those tiers? So just as a comparison, the leopard gecko market sells about 4,000 leopard geckos a year. The ball python market sells about 45,000 ball pythons a year. And the crested gecko market sells about 10,000 crested geckos a year. But since the last couple years of 2020, 2022, when the big boom was happening, there was probably way more being sold when they became popular. However, this is still a good approximation of how many animals are sold on Morph Market. Now, the reason why Morph Market is a good analysis of how many animals are being sold is because even if somebody sells a gecko at a show, they're gonna mark it sold on Morph Market if their animal is on Morph Market, and most people have their animals on Morph Market. Now, let's take that 4,000 leopard geckos and subtract these 270 investors, right? These are people these are stores that are actually selling animals. So these are people that are actually investing in animals to try to make a business out of it and sell and breed animals. So that leaves us with about 3,700 people a year on Morph Market that are looking to buy animals that are not necessarily stores or not necessarily breeders. They're just looking for pets. So if you are trying to sell to investors, your market is about 270 people. If you are trying to sell to investors and pet keepers, your market is going to be about 4,000 people, because there's about 4,000 leopard geckos sold a year. And if you are trying to sell to just pet keepers and not investors, your market is going to be about 3,700 people. So still pretty good. Now, if there's 4,000 leopard geckos sold off of Morph Market every single year, the vast majority of those leopard geckos that are sold, people are going to be buying them from these 45 breeders that are in the top 15%. Because when people invest in a leopard gecko, they want a high quality gecko, and people are willing to pay a lot of money for a high quality gecko or find deals. But regardless, the people that are going to be producing the highest quality are often going to be in these top 15% right here. So if you take 4,000 leopard geckos sold and you divide it by 45 breeders that are competing in the top 15%, you're looking at about 90 geckos per breeder. So that means that anyone in the top tier and anyone in the middle tier, on average, this is just an average, is going to be selling about 90 leopard geckos per year. Now, the way that this number could skew is that some of these people might only be selling 50 leopard geckos per year. Other of these people might be selling 200 leopard geckos per year. So there will be a little bit of variance, but if you're looking at just calculating the data and evening the odds, what you could expect, because this is an expectation as a new breeder coming in, is what you could expect if you were part of this top 15% is that you would sell about 90 geckos a year. Now, anyone who is a beginner, or some people even in the middle, will tell you that that is not an easy number to achieve. It takes work, it takes reputation, it takes dedication, it takes nice animals, and it takes upfront cost, which is something we're going to get into later on. But I just want to show you something here. If the best that you could hope for as a beginner or mid-tier or even top-tier breeder is 90 sales per year, if you want to know how much you can make in leopard geckos as an individual, if you are averaging $100 per leopard gecko, that's only $9,000 a year that you're making. If you're averaging $300 per sale for 90 leopard geckos, that's $27,000. If you're averaging $500 per sale per 90 leopard geckos per year, that's $45,000. And here's the big one right here. If you're averaging $1,000 per sale across 90 sales, that's $90,000 for that year. But this is something almost impossible and unattainable, to be able to sell 90 leopard geckos per year at an average of $1,000 per gecko. You could probably talk to anyone in this top 15% right here, and they'll let you know that that is not an easy thing to do. And people have accomplished that by a couple different strategies, which we will talk about later. And then I'll also go over my personal strategy and how I managed to be part of this top 5% in just my first year breeding. And my strategy is going to be very niche and very different, because not a lot of people are going to have the certain statistics of what helped me to achieve that number within their first year, sometimes not even within their first 10 years. And I'll show you what that is and why that is as the video continues on. So all of this is also just referring to gross revenue. This is not even considering the expenses that go into caring for leopard geckos and how much your expenses are going to be. Now, I've calculated this in the past to be anywhere from $25 to $50 per gecko to care for, depending if it's all you, depending if you have employees. It's going to be somewhere in this range of $25 to $50 per gecko per year. So let's take the middle of that. Let's say you fall into somewhere about $35 per gecko per year to take care of. For every 100 geckos, you're looking at about $3,500 worth of expenses. So let's say you're part of this first group here, where you're selling 90 geckos a year at an average of $100 per gecko, and you're making about $9,000, but your expenses are about $3,500. You can see that that is almost 50% your expenses compared to your revenue. And that is considering not paying yourself, which is something that I have off to the side right here. A lot of things that people don't consider, they don't consider themselves an employee. Now, I can tell you, I put in countless hours of work to get that $100,000 worth of leopard geckos. And in reality, if I was to put in that same amount of time into other markets, I could make more money, like drop selling or anything else. But I love leopard geckos and I love reptiles. And so I'm willing to put in the work. And something that I'm going to talk about throughout this video as well is I am putting in sweat equity. I'm putting in effort that is going to pay off in assets. And so let's say I put in 100 hours of work for these leopard geckos, but then I have a $200,000 worth of assets that I get out. Even if I only made $20,000 in sales, I have $200,000 in assets. That work was worth it for future revenue to build up your empire, so to speak. And so I'll kind of expand on that a little bit more as I get into what my personal strategy was in making that $100,000 our first year of selling. Now, one thing that is not considered is that, let's say out of this 3,700 keepers, let's say that you are able to sell to about 300 of them at an average of $200 per sale. That's $60,000 worth of gross sales. That's not considering your time and expenses and all that stuff, but we're talking in gross terms here, and then everything else can be figured out after that, because a lot of reptile business owners don't consider their labor as an expense, and they do it either as a hobby, a part-time thing. As you get into the full-time thing, you will need to really consider all your expenses, but for now, let's just talk about gross revenue. Leopard geckos are fairly inexpensive to take care of. When you start talking about ball pythons and other species that require unique lighting or expensive food to feed, like rats and rabbits and all that kind of stuff, the expenses will go up. But leopard geckos, honestly, can be very, very cheap and inexpensive to care for. So let's say you're able to sell 300 geckos at an average of $200 per gecko. That's $60,000. And you sold that to 300 new customers. And you think to yourself, wow, I captured 300 recurring customers. Yes and no. A lot of these customers are pet people and they only want one leopard gecko every couple years or something like that. Versus if you are selling to these 270 investors, these people are buying 5 to 10 geckos every 6 to 12 months. And if you're able to sell that to like even 20 or 30 different people a year, that's a significant amount of money, and you're going to not need to sell as many geckos. And so you could arguably make easier and more money than someone who is selling these 300 geckos, which is a lot. However, eventually the con to that side is that the same people you're selling to are going to become your competition in these 45 breeders. Only 45 people can hold this slot at any one moment when the market is steady. If the market is going up, this 15% of top and middle breeders will also go up. If the market's going down, this 15% might turn into only 10% of top and middle breeders, and your market share and revenue share of customers is going to also go down. But if it's staying steady every single year, you're going to have people coming in, people going out, people coming in, people going out of this 45 breeders, and it will stay steady. And if you don't give up, you will be able to maintain your sales within that range with new customers. However, in the same way that pet customers only come back at a certain frequency, eventually your high-end customers are also going to stop coming to you because now they have all the animals they need and they're going to become what's called self-sufficient, which is what a lot of these top and middle breeders are, especially the top 5%. They're completely self-sufficient. They've bought and invested in enough animals to where they no longer need to bring in new bloodlines, and so now they are no longer a customer to anybody, with the rare exception that they want to pick up a few things here and there every now and then. So just things to keep in mind. The other thing that a lot of people don't consider is when you are selling and holding back animals, you're going to want to hold back about 25 to 50% of your best stock every single year, because you're going to have breeders that don't breed for you, and you're going to have breeders that breed seasonally at different times of the year. So to spread out your money and spread out your revenue that you can generate, you want breeders breeding at all kinds of year, and you want at least 25 to 50% holdbacks so that you can continue to improve upon your lines without new investment. The caveat to that is, if you sell all of your holdbacks, you could then repurchase high-end animals to infuse into your projects. So you're making a lot of money by selling, but then you're also spending a lot of money by reacquiring, versus if you were to just hold back that 25 to 50% of your highest end stuff, you don't need to invest anything, and you're just gonna, like, printing money. You're just printing these high-end geckos, and they're going to become animals that you can sustain over time. This is a strategy that I used with my Black Knights specifically, and I will get into this once we talk about the strategy, but I didn't sell anything my first few years. I held back everything, the low tier, the mid tier, the high tier animals. I held them all back so that I could be more flexible with my pricing, and I would have no need to reinvest in other animals because I would just have hundreds of high-end holdbacks, and I can crossbreed those and intermingle those between each other for diversity of genetics, and I don't have a need to spend money, so that at some point within the first 5 years of my business, it's just going to be making money. No longer spending money, just making money. But in the beginning, growth and expansion is going to cost a lot of money, and that's what I'm talking about. For every gecko you hold back, I spend $50 per year per gecko because I have employees that I pay to take care of these animals, and the food cost plus the employee cost costs me about $50 per gecko per year. And I have about 1,000 geckos on average all year long. So let's say I have 1,000 geckos times $50 per gecko. That's $50,000 worth of expenses per year to hold on to that gecko. So I better be making a lot of money, or I better sell off the unnecessary stuff over time and just keep the highest end stuff. But if you don't want to sell your highest end leopard geckos and you want to hold those back, you need to still make money for the business somehow, which is where I developed my strategy of quality geckos for quality price. So I could sell high-end leopard geckos for more reasonable prices, and I could attack this market right here. Instead of this market, which is only 45 people to go after, or this market, which is only 270 people to go after, I really wanted to go after this market of 3,700 to 4,000 people to go after, based on the quality of my animals, and the price that I could sell those animals for would apply to these 3,700 people, because these 3,700 people are usually going to not have an investor mindset for the most part. They just want a high quality animal for a price they can afford. And in leopard geckos, that's anywhere from $50 to like $300-ish is what people are willing to pay for a pet. Some people are willing to pay $2,000 for a pet, but I would say if you're looking to get mass numbers, the vast majority of people are looking for something somewhere in the $100 to $200 range. And so that's what I really wanted to specialize in. and produce the highest quality that I could and sell them at that price point so that our geckos were very attractive to people. And people could either use our geckos for breeding investments at that price or just a pet. And I wanted to appeal to a much wider range of customer. Now, keep in mind, one of the things that drew me to the reptile market as a whole was, first of all, my love for reptiles. And even if I don't make any money doing reptiles, I would still do this as long as I can because I love reptiles, and as long as it's paying the bills and I'm able to do this for a living, that's what I would want to do. But one of the thoughts that came to my mind early on is that if you can master the market of reptile that you want to be in, reptiles is actually a really great business to be in. And one of the reasons for that is because every single day there is an 8-year-old boy or girl about to turn 9 years old that is going to ask their mother or father for a brand new leopard gecko or ball python as a pet. And then that person is going to want to buy more. They're going to want to collect. They're going to turn into a breeder. And so if you can capture that customer early on and have a great interaction with that customer, at some point they are most likely going to come back. And so these 3,700 people that are shopping on Morph Market every single year, we could almost look at those as new customers because there's new people coming into the market every single year. And this is a great way to understand that the more eyeballs you can get in front of, the more customers you can grab, I think that's going to mean a huge difference for you in the long run. So that even if that 8 or 9-year-old boy or girl only buys a $100 leopard gecko from you now, they might come back and spend 10 grand with you in 10 years. And so playing the long game and investing in these new customers early on and getting as many sales to as many people as you can, I think spreads your odds better of increasing the amount of recurring customers that you can attain. All right, so now let's talk strategy and what we applied to our business to be able to generate $100,000 our first year of selling. So the pyramid is broken down in summary right here. So top tier breeders almost never buy from anyone. So keep that in mind. If you want to sell to people that are in the top 5%, they almost never buy from anyone because their collections are established already. And even if they want something new, they're going to be very, very selective with who they buy it from. But keep that in mind. If you're spending $100,000 over the course of 5 to 10 years with a high-end breeder that's in the top 10%, and you produce something they like from their own stock that they didn't produce, they're going to be much more willing to buy that from you than from somebody else because they know where your stock came from. Now, one of the problems is a lot of people's collections are mixed with all different kinds of stock. But at the end of the day, if you're spending high-end money with high-end people in that top 5%, you're going to be more on their radar to unique things that you produce than anybody else in the hobby. But like I said, they don't buy too often and they don't buy very much when they do. So just keep that in mind as far as your strategy is concerned. These breeders tend to do very well because they have desirable geckos and good exposure in the hobby. One of the ways that you could get into this top 5 to 15% is if you have a specific thing that you specialize in. So for example, there's a couple people that come to mind right now. There are certain people that specialize in importation. There are certain people that specialize in rare and high-end leopard gecko projects. There are other people that just specialize in having a really, really good reputation and no stain on their name, which is very tough to do in the leopard gecko hobby specifically because once we get to mid-tier, that 15% in the middle. So when you're looking at that 10% in the middle, when you're looking at these people that are making $50,000 a year or around that point, it is a cutthroat place to be right here because everybody is willing to sell their grandmother's favorite handkerchief just to get ahead and stab each other in the back. Not everybody. I know I just said everybody, but a lot of people. And the more that you talk to these people that are competing in this market, the more that you will see everybody separated. Everybody just does their own thing because they have experienced the backstabbing to get to the top. They've experienced that firsthand. A lot of people have rubbed them the wrong way, or they have rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And there's a lot of broken friendships, broken relationships. So let me just read this. Mid-tier breeders will often buy from top-tier breeders and have the same quality, but not as much notoriety or need to buy from in the hobby. So for example, there's one breeder that comes to mind right now where if you are investing, everybody recommends this person because they have such a good reputation. Now, mind you, a lot of these people that have that reputation may not be backed up. So for example, the person that I'm thinking about right now actually does not show anything about how they operate their business or anything like that. They've gone on talk shows and they've talked about it, but they never actually show you. So keep that in mind, is almost nobody in the leopard gecko hobby shows you their operation. And that is for good reason, because leopard geckos are often bred in racks, in boxes, and they're kept in the thousands in these breeders' operations. And if people were to see behind the scenes of what that looks like, it could taint the image of their favorite breeders. And best believe those people in the middle right here that are trying to get to the top, the minute that anyone at the top shows them or gives them any handout to critique, these people in the middle are going to stab them in the back and try to overtake them at the top. Now, I'm speaking very cynically here because this does happen. Obviously, not everybody in the hobby is going to do this, but if you're to talk to enough people that are in the middle or at the top, they will tell you one of the reasons that almost nobody collaborates with each other in the leopard gecko hobby and there's not a lot of communal promotion is because a lot of people have gotten on each other's nerves and just done things to each other in the hobby because it is competitive. And because people try to do it full time, if you're trying to do it full time and only make $50,000 before expenses, so maybe you're only making $25,000 after expenses, it puts a lot of pressure on you who's trying to do it full time to want to succeed or need to succeed. And you're already competing in a down market where the top value of animals is dropping every single year, and it's only around that $1,000 price point. So a lot of people just kind of get in their head about that, and I think it brings out the worst of our flesh and our humanity as far as jealousy, envy, and all that is concerned. And one last sentence I had here. This is a very competitive space where you will find the most controversy and difficulty maintaining your reputation and friendships. There's only one person in the hobby that I can think of that I've never heard anybody say anything negative about. And like I said, it doesn't mean that that person is scotch-free or clean. It just means that they've done a very, very good job at maintaining their image and not allowing people to see anything that somebody could critique. On the opposite end of that, I have been so open because my heart is so open to want to teach, educate, be inclusive, and involve as many people as possible. I show everybody everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, and a lot of people have critiqued me for that. And it's brought in a lot of people in this mid-tier right here that want to be on top and want to compete with my business. It's brought out the worst of them as far as false accusations, attacking my family, and just all kinds of really negative behavior that is not great human to human. I always say this, is that at the end of the day, humans are more important than geckos. And so my relationship with humanity, my relationship with humans has to be number one no matter what, because their soul matters. They matter as a fellow tribesman of the human population on a completely different level than animals or geckos. All right, so moving on to category number 3, which is the category that I purposely put myself into, and for a couple reasons I will show you. I'll just read this off. Beginner breeders and keepers is my personal favorite group of people to interact with. They are doe-eyed. You know, when you first get into something and you're so excited and all of that, they're doe-eyed and positively excited about their pets or their journey into the wild world of leopard gecko collection and have not yet developed any biases or bad experiences to cast a negative light over the hobby that they are now pursuing. It is also the largest group of keepers by far, and thus offers many opportunities to meet new people every year and have fun talking geckos. So going back to my diagram here, you can see there's 270 investors, breeders on Morph Market for leopard geckos, but there is 4,000 plus just regular people that are trying to buy leopard geckos as a pet or for their kids or something like that. So it is almost arguably a 10 times greater market as far as the amount of people that are in it and the experience that you get working with newer people or people that are just entering the hobby that have not been skewed by like the negativity and the negative side of like humanity's involvement in relationships in the hobby and how that can be really combative and negative. It's just a lot nicer to deal with. Right? And so obviously you want to be friends with everybody. You want to be friends with people in the middle. You want to be friends with people at the top. And of course you want to be friends with people at the entry level point. But I'm just speaking to you from experience of what I've gone through, a number of other breeders that I've spoken to that they've gone through, and whether people really want to admit this or not, even some of our biggest critics that may be watching this, they could also admit that they see these tendencies of negativity and stuff like that that does exist in the hobby, if they were like truly to be honest with themselves. Now, it's always been my heart's desire and goal to get rid of the negativity, but it has been proven to be super hard and almost impossible. And I think one of the reasons for that is because of how competitive leopard geckos are. We were talking about that market value and that drop a second ago. I'm trying to think if there's anything I missed here. Let me know in a comment below if what you thought about this video, different points of this video, and if there was other topics that I missed or that you want more elaboration on. But I thought this video did a great job at just kind of generalizing what to expect entering into the leopard gecko hobby from a market perspective, from an investor's perspective, and even new keepers or breeders that might be thinking about possibly becoming a breeder in the future. You want to figure out, where do you want to fall into? Do you want to try to be part of this top 5%, part of the middle, or relate more to entry-level keepers? Now, mind you, we made $100,000 and that puts us in the top 5%. So even if your strategy is selling to people in the middle or the top or the entry-level keeper, if you make a certain amount of revenue generation and money, it will automatically put you in the top. And no matter what you do, you found a strategy that worked for you. So let me talk about why real quick. I remember I was supposed to talk about this. Why the strategy that I implemented would almost never work for anybody. The strategy that I implemented was, when I first started collecting and breeding high-end geckos was about 2018, 2019. And you'll be like, Frank, but you said this was your first year selling leopard geckos. Listen, so the first year that I produced like 300 leopard geckos, I think it was like my second year breeding or something like that. I produced like 300 leopard geckos. I had a bunch of leopard geckos. And just for experimentation's sake, I wanted to put them on Morph Market. And so I listed them at about $200 for, at that time, pretty nice and high-end tangerines. And I got no interest, no bites. Now, granted, this was when I was first starting off. But what that told me was, as a new breeder entering into this hobby, I need to change my strategy. Because if I'm not able to sell, my goal was always to make like $100,000 a year selling leopard geckos. And it's funny that it happened in my first year. But if my goal was to make $100,000 selling leopard geckos, and I was trying to sell that at $200 a piece, that means I would need to sell 500 leopard geckos at $200 a piece. And here I am, I can't even sell one. And so I said to myself, the strategy has to change. Something else is going on here. And obviously I always study the market. I've always geeked out on this kind of stuff. And yes, there are people that sell for $1,000 geckos and all that kind of stuff. But if they're part of this top 5% or top 10%, they've already been established longer than you, and maybe their company is getting recommended more than you. Now, the one thing that I had going for me that almost nobody has in the hobby is our social media reach and experience. So real quick, this will be kind of fun to make a trip down memory lane here, but let's go to our videos, my oldest video, because this is when 6 years ago when I started. Look at how I started. This is absolutely ridiculous. Here's where I first started buying and unboxing, you know, my first like investor quality leopard geckos and stuff. I started getting into crested geckos, boas, gargoyle geckos, tegus. I started getting into a bunch of stuff, right? But my first video, when I really started taking it seriously and I was like, I'm gonna make a business and a brand out of this, was 6 years ago. So that's about 2018, 2019, like I said earlier. By the time I started really breeding was like right here 4 years ago. So like it took me 2 years to produce my first like 300 to 500 leopard geckos. And at that point, that's when I noticed that it's difficult to sell these things. Like they just don't sell themselves. Even though I had a growing channel at that point, me and Geckopia were neck and neck. Like I remember when I first started making videos, I was chasing Geckopia because Geckopia is another leopard gecko channel. Cool dude, great dude. Makes a lot of products for geckos and reptiles as well. But he was at like 1,000 subscribers and I was at like 400 or something like that. And he always stayed about 1,000 subscribers ahead of me until I started getting viral shorts and stuff like that. So once you go to like the shorts and my most popular, you can see this short has 69 million views, 22 million views, 4 million views, 3 million views, 2 million views, 700,000 views. Once that really started taking off for me, it just went to the moon. And Geckopia is still grinding and doing his thing, but you also have to consider at the point where it really blew up, both Geckopia and I were around 9,000 to 10,000 subscribers. Might have even been a little less. We might have been at like 7,000 or 8,000, but we were both finding a difficult time, even though we were the only ones making consistent high quality leopard gecko videos. In 2019, 2020, we found it really, really difficult to grow to 100,000 followers without the shorts. Eventually, he started doing shorts as well as I was doing shorts, and that's where both our channels really began to accelerate, and especially mine with these ultra viral videos and whatnot. But when you look at like the ball python market or the crested gecko market, there are breeders that have legitimately 100,000 followers without making any shorts or without having any viral shorts. And that's because those markets are literally like 10 times bigger. I mean, I showed you right here. So in the last 9 years, 36,000 leopard geckos were sold. In the last 9 years on Morph Market, 400,000 ball pythons were sold. That is literally more than a 10 times markup. And so it makes sense that Geckopia and I were maxing out around 10,000 genuine horizontal view followers until our shorts really kicked in, and then that opens you up to the entire world, and that's a whole nother topic that I can go down, but shorts really blow up your channel. But with the ball python guys, you can see that they naturally have 100,000 investors, followers. We only had 10,000 investors, but they're a 10 times markup above us, and the numbers make sense. So even though these numbers aren't perfect, and there's probably going to be a lot of people with like some negative comments like, oh, you're not considering all the geckos that get wholesaled and all that. Sure, but I am talking about the retail market, the customer to seller relationship market, which is most of the time where people want to be. And this is actually, I think, a pretty good average of what to expect. Again, expected average revenue. And the funny thing is, from the people that I've talked to and from my own personal experience, this chart and mapping the data based off of Morph Market statistics alone is a pretty close assimile to reality and what it actually is. So let's see. I'm trying to think if I forgot anything here. I'm trying not to do 45-minute videos anymore because they take forever to like edit and get out there. But man, when I get talking, I just get talking. So one other thing I need to show you real quick is I was a little bit facetious. I don't know if the right word is facetious. Treating serious issues with deliberate, inappropriate humor, flippant. No, that's not what I was doing. I was a little bit unprecise with talking about how much money we actually generated in 2023. Now, like I said, from 2019 to 2020 to 2021 to 2022, I did not sell almost anything. I could count the number of geckos on my hand. As a matter of fact, I think one of our first years where I actually started selling leopard geckos, I recorded like $30,000, and that was dubia roaches and leopard geckos, and tegus was like $30,000. The next year was like $50,000. And then this year, which was for 2023, which was our first full year of selling reptiles. So in 2022 or whatever, I only sold like the last quarter of the year, or just sporadically here and there throughout the year. But for the most part, I was holding everything back, holding my black knights back, holding my tangerines back, holding my crosses back, white and yellow, snows, wild types, everything, holding all of that back until about 2023, which is where I really started selling massively. And so like I showed in my last video, if I was to scroll through all of the recorded sales that I have from my data platform, it was 414 lines. Now, each one of those lines represents a different customer. Some are reoccurring customers, but some of those customers bought 10 geckos from me at once. So in 2023, you could roughly assume, let's just say roughly assume there's 400 lines. Let's just roughly assume it's about 400 to 500 geckos that was actually sold in 2023, sorry. There might be a little bit of 2022 that carried over here, because I can see the first 35 lines are from, summer of 2022. So my first year selling, when I made that like $50,000, it was only 6 months. And then my second year selling was about still about 400 different customers, different sales. And I don't even think that this data sheet particularly kept track of like shows and sales at shows. And we would average anywhere between 40 to 60 leopard geckos sold per show and do 3 to 4 shows a year. Right now, I'm actually trying to focus mostly on doing everything online, because growing a family, wanting to have kids and all that kind of stuff, you don't really want to travel as much. And I want to master online, like master it, before reinserting myself back into like shows and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I am focusing on right now. So in 2023, about 400 leopard gecko sales and $100,000. But what I didn't show you was that some of this recorded revenue is actually from YouTube. So if you figure, I think we made about $10,000 off YouTube in 2023, and then maybe another $5,000 to $10,000 in like dubia roach sales, because I was selling dubias at that time, and like tegus and stuff. So we have to take this total here, 106,000, and then subtract 20,000, and that's like $86,000 worth of just leopard gecko sales. But that's still really, really good for your first year of selling. Now, how much money and profit did I actually make from that? Zero. You can see my expenses here were listed as $120,000 worth of expenses for $106,000 worth of revenue. And you're like, Frank, where did all that money come from? Well, like I said, if I'm caring for 1,000 leopard geckos on average, and I multiply that by $50 per gecko, that's $50,000 just in care cost, just for the leopard geckos. This isn't even counting sailfin dragons, bearded dragons, ball pythons, tegus that we do. And this $120,000 worth of expenses right here includes paying for the infrastructure and the support of holding back animals. So remember, in 2023, I still held back a ton of high-end animals, a ton of black knights, a ton of super high-end jungles and tangerines and white and yellows and Max Snows and our Mr. Freeze project and all of that kind of stuff. And so part of these expenses are paying for the maintenance of animals that are going to make me quadruple or 10 times the money in the future. And that was part of my plan. So I think this is our third official tax year. So like tax year 1, if I'm remembering correctly, was like $30,000 of gross revenue, $70,000 worth of losses, because we were still investing a lot at that point. Year number 2 was like $50,000 worth of gross revenue, And that was only for 6 months of actually selling animals and about $70,000 worth of expenses. And then year 3, you can see right here was $106,000 worth of revenue, $120,000 worth of expenses. And so you can see that I was actually really impressed. I did not think we were going to make that much by any means. When I tallied up those numbers, I was like, wait, no, this can't be. And I double, triple, quadruple checked everything because I was like, wait, there's no way that we made 106,000 gross revenue, but we did. And, so talking about the strategy that I implemented to get there was quality geckos for quality price with quality customer service for life. I knew that competing in this top and middle 10%, 15% right here against other breeders to try to sell to these 270 investors, I knew as a newer breeder coming in the scene at 2018, 2019, and when I made that experiment and these animals didn't sell even for $200 for really nice animals that were probably worth $300 to $400 at that time, I knew that I had to change my strategy. And so my strategy became produce as many high quality geckos as I can, hold them all back, continue to produce as many high quality geckos as I can, and sell at a price point that I personally could find success in. And that was at that $50 to like $200 price point. Now, we did sell $2,000 animals, $1,000 animals, bundles of leopard geckos and all that kind of stuff. But when you're looking at quantity of people that are buying from you, one person that spends $2,000 with you is not equal to 10 people who spend $10,000 with you total. So do you see what I'm saying is I knew that this market was bigger right here, and I really wanted to appeal to this market. Plus, I just get to deal with really fun and excitable people that are just doe-eyed and excited to be in the hobby and excited to learn about leopard geckos, and I don't have to worry about as much like backstabbing and negativity and all that kind of stuff. So let me know what you thought of this video. This video is not a condemnation to anybody, but you know how I like to teach openly and honestly and teach people what to expect as they are coming into the hobby. And again, this is simply a video about expected average revenue in relationship to the data that's been recorded by the amount of geckos on Morph Market, the amount of geckos sold on Morph Market, the amount of stores and investors on Morph Market versus approximately the amount of pet keepers and shoppers on Morph Market on a yearly basis. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. So much love and respect for helping us to hit $100,000 in our first full official year of selling. The $50,000 from 2022 was in 6 months, but from 12 months of 2023, $106,000, not bad. Got you guys to thank for it. Thank you so much. My heart goes out to you. Peace and love to you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, have yourself a geeky gecko great day. Peace.